Anyway, thanks for coming out. I'm Celeste Fraser. I'm on the board of the Watershed Coalition. And you all know about us, I'm sure. I'll just give you a quick recap. We formed right after the flood of 2013 in order to restore all of the riparian areas in town. We still do that. We still replant long rivers, and we have parties where we pull invasives. We're also doing a lot with fire mitigation. So we've got teams that we send out into the woods who help us figure out what trees need to go to prevent fire. And there are neighborhoods in town that we work with. We have grants that allow us to serve different neighborhoods. So the idea is to connect forests in the valley with the forests in National Park. So they're all healthy. Gary Miller was the first president of the Watershed Coalition.
First president lasted more than 4 months. So I think it might have been, it might have been the second. I think Frank Tice was for a couple months. You want to do this? We'll take this time.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for coming. You can be a member very cheaply if you want to keep coming to these. We have member greeting groups every now and then. We have a very cool donation box that was made and donated by one of our board members. So check it out. It's really cool. Fancy Gansy. All right, I want to introduce Gary. He is a wildlife biologist, worked with the park and with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. He's going to talk about wolves.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Norman. Yes, and thanks to the Watershed Coalition for all the good work you continue to do. The kind of the groundbreaker kind of few things, installing what we call beaver dam analogs.
Oh, yeah.
Had a lot to do with bringing beaver back into the Estes Valley after a lot of them wound up in Greeley or whatever after the flood. But Park Service has now adopted that technology, and the beaver are back in pretty good force in Rocky Mountain National Park. As I should probably explain, it's just kind of putting in basically a fake beaver dam, and then brings the water level up. And when beaver encounter it, they say, "Yeah, you ain't such good engineers." They start adding to it, and before you know it, you got a beaver pond and beaver. So again, congrats to the Watershed Coalition for all the good work you do. Yeah, my name's Gary Miller. I worked for National as a wildlife biologist, got my graduate degree from Colorado State University. Go Rams. Hey, all right. Early in my career, worked with Colorado Division of Wildlife, now Parks and Wildlife. I was among the first non-game threatened and endangered species researchers. Didn't do anything specifically with wolves, but was the principal researcher for mammals and birds that were at-risk species or small populations. And throughout my career, that's been my focus has been on recovery of at-risk species and kind of the dynamics of small populations colonizing populations, which is what we're seeing here. Yes, I left the Parks and Wildlife as a mammals research leader. I oversaw the partway through the lynx links research that accompanied the reintroduction. A lot of carnivore work. And also the first, what's called the State Wildlife Action Plan that covers not just traditional wildlife as game and fish agencies have, but also, Lord, insects. How dare we? So, and then went to work with the National Park Service here. I also had worked at Isle Royale National Park, if you're familiar with that, and we'll work there in Shenandoah National Park. But worked here towards the end of my career with Rocky Mountain National Park, mostly on the elk and vegetation management plan. So I don't know, and I know you've got some folks zooming. We can keep this fairly a small group, keep it fairly informal. So I'm fine with folks raising a question as we go along, and you've got that capability on Zoom. Great. So chat a little bit about wolves. Yes.
Would you have to kill me? You told me what that picture was taken.
I have no idea.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was on
that's
the-
okay.
It's on U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website. And we were talking about it earlier. I'd lay money that it's from a wolf sanctuary somewhere.
Make a great calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, if you could go on Google and type in wolf photo, that one's probably within the first 20. So here's as the rule is, tell folks what you're gonna tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I think, how many of you are at least somewhat familiar with the restoration effort, the reintroduction effort of the wolves? Ah, okay. So you have heard that rumor. We have wolves in Colorado, and I thought just to start out with, rather than waiting to the end to give you all the updates, I'll tell you what we know so far. This is all publicly available information, not always easy to get. You gotta do some detective work on the Parks and Wildlife's website and searching their news releases and things. So provide you so I don't have any secret information, okay? And then from there, we'll go on to the basic ecology of the wolves. These are going to be the things that influence their success in reestablishing population. And then a brief story of how we got here. How many of you remember Proposition 114? Okay, in 2020, it was the direction, gave the state direction to reestablish a self-sustaining population of wolves. Some expectations, what kinds of effects this is going to have, what kind of changes we may see in our social fabric as well as ecologically. Cover a little bit of legal stuff, and then I'll try to bring it together, what I call the upshot. There's some interesting things from a broader perspective that this effort has brought about. Now, where did I get the information? Some is stuff I've learned through 50 years of studying small populations. I do not use anything from Wikipedia or just Google or social media. I've been very, very disappointed in some of the social media posts I've seen. If any of you following any of those from organizations that are looking at wolves and putting up information, ones I've looked at, 98% false. So at any rate, I would encourage you, if you are interested and you want to drill down further into information about the ecology of wolves or whatever, don't go to Google, Google Scholar. All right? Are you familiar with it? Okay, that is a database of peer-reviewed scientific literature. Okay, it's not rumors and propaganda. It is published. Now, to get full articles, sometimes you got to pay a fairly dear price, but they will at least put out the abstracts of information that are open to review. And it's not just wildlife stuff, it's medical stuff, you know, economics studies, but it's Google Scholar. So, as you say, master reviewers, in December of 2023, wolves, 10 wolves from Oregon were released into Grand and Summit County, Colorado. The first ones were 5 that were just outside Kremling, near an area of, I think it's pretty common knowledge, an area called Radium, state wildlife area there. And then later in the week, 5 more were released, probably a little farther south. They were from Oregon. There were 6 females and 4 males in these first 10, and only there were 2 full adults. Those were both males. The remainder of the males and all of the females were classified as yearlings. And what that meant was they're about 1.8 years old. Right now, as we speak, they're a full 2 years old. And they can breed at that age. They say they were captured within a fairly short period of time in Oregon under an agreement with the Oregon Game and Fish. They were guarded, captured, inspected for disease, health, any injuries or anything like that prior to coming to Colorado. Then what was done is what's called the hard release. They weren't held in captivity. If any of you are familiar with the way Yellowstone National Park reintroduced their wolves, they put a large facility together and held the wolves in captivity for some time. The ones that were also successful reintroduction in Idaho in the Frank Church Wilderness area, they were done with a hard release. That is, scoop them up quick as you can and put them out in the wild. So we see here, yes, Governor Polis is on this one. But he was there. There were about 40 folks that were there celebrating this, you know, just landmark event. And a lot of congratulations go around. There was a lot of hard work went into this. That was good. They congratulations. There were about, like I say, about 40 folks were there, and there were 5 souls that didn't really like being there. If you get my drift, okay? So I've always like participated in these kinds of things. I always say, let's be a little solemn about this, because you know there's some creatures that you're just putting under a great deal of stress. But at any rate, off they went and started moving around. Yes.
Do people like to comment now or maybe later on why they picked such a relatively populated area as opposed to somewhere further west in Colorado? that wouldn't have been so populated?
Yeah, the,
Or actually populated by ranches, I would assume there's.
yeah, I don't know that there are that many. We'll get into a little bit about ranch, and the distribution of cattle in Colorado a little bit later. So it was, one of the things that, with the plan is the release had to take place on either private or state-owned lands, not federal. So a lot of large swaths of wilderness, for instance, that were not populated, comes off the table. So I would guess that the folks tried to get as good as they could, given those restrictions. The reason, I'll get into a little bit later, but basically the reason we couldn't do it on federal lands was the law that was passed by voters said you gotta introduce them by the end of 2023. If you're gonna do it on federal lands, it would require an environmental impact statement or environmental assessment. That probably would have taken 3 to 4 years. So you were logistically, you were bureaucratically kind of forced into that box. If I'm sure, I can guarantee you that if hadn't had that restriction, I think the release would have taken part farther away from human habitation.
And do the wolves have collars or radios?
Yes, all good. Thanks for bringing that up. So all of these wolves had radio collars. They're not the kinds that you may see where folks have the antenna and, you know, get a beep, 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 beep. These are GPS collars shooting up the satellite and then coming down, getting a fix on them every 4 hours and then downloading from the satellite every 16 hours. So you never have, well, I know right where it is. And also the two wolves, we'll talk, let's see if that's the next slide. Yeah, here's the distribution. In addition to those 10 releases, there have been for a couple of years, 2 males up in Jackson County, and they also have radio collars, GPS collars on them. And they've been wandering around there. A couple of years ago, they had more wolves than that. They naturally migrated in from Wyoming. They did have a female, and had pups. They were subsequently lost. General thought was they may have made the mistake of going into Wyoming, which is a free fire zone for wolves. But at any rate, two adult males are still roaming around Jackson County. So that's there. The others, the Parks and Wildlife puts out a map every month, I think 3rd or 4th Wednesday of every month, and it shows generally where wolves have occurred in that past month. Not specifically, so wolves didn't occur all this way, but in order to protect the precise locations, what the state does is just say, if a wolf is found in a particular drainage, a watershed, then the whole watershed gets colored. So this one is the latest that came out towards the end of April. Some things that happened that were of note to me. You were over at Crumley in Grand County when the initial release occurred. Some have pushed all the way to north of Craig, at least to some extent. Earlier, there were some that had really punched their way into Rio Blanco County. They have since retreated. You had a question? Okay. The Larimer County folks, the big news here is the North Fork of the Big Thompson, okay, which goes, if you know the area, up Lost Lake, Lake Louise, up at headwaters in the North Fork with Big Thompson, all the way down, which runs all the way down to Drake. But in Larimer County, they've been in that drainage. They've certainly been in the North Fork of Castle up right for the Lakes area, and there they have been in the Laramie River Valley, if you know that, that area. And interestingly, that's an area that in years past, some of the naturally colonizing, pioneering wolves have spent some time in. Relative to Rocky Mountain National Park, you look, where are we? 34, okay, there's the North Fork of Big Thompson. They stayed on the other side, but the headwaters of Colorado River, which takes you down here into the counties, that they've been somewhere along there.
Are the lines on this map that define the watersheds, are they the gray lines or the purple? Dark?
These lines.
So once they're inside the purple lines, that color gets set up.
Yeah, so except over here. And it's within on the 4 hour period, we get those up. Yes.
Can you go a little bit closer because they're having
Sure.
trouble hearing you?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, but yeah, you have to kind of squint a little bit, but you'll see the watershed outlines there. Otherwise, you can go to USGS site and look at, they're not called watersheds. Now it's hydrologic units, and each one has a code, and they're nested. So, you know, the Big Thompson, North Fork of the Big Thompson is part of a larger watershed, you know, the whole Big Thompson, which then is part of the South Platte watershed, which, et cetera. Yes, question?
A little bit earlier, 10 that were released in 2023, were they all from the same pack in Oregon? Or were they separate wolves they got from different places?
Oh.
And are they moving as a pack here?
Oh, not necessarily, the question, whether it's all from one pack or multiple, or, and did they transplant them as a pack? No, they came from several different packs in Oregon, and the releases weren't dictated, they were dictated more by male-female ratios than they were as far as whether they had associated in the past. One of the things you may see out there has to do with that the packs or the wolves that came from packs, a couple of the packs in Oregon were depredating packs. Okay, that was part of the stipulation where the state was not going to accept wolves from packs that had chronic depredation. Now, I know of one pack that was a source of some of the young of the wolves that were captured, and that pack had some distant time in the past, perhaps 6-8 months prior, had done some cattle killing, but the prime animal out of that pack that had done the killing had been removed long before this captures took place. So the ones they captured had no history of predating on cattle. So status now, you may have heard that that one of the transplanted wolves has died in Larimer County. And again, with pioneering new animals that are in unfamiliar territory, that's not uncommon. And especially with wolves, if perhaps it got separated from the others, if it's on its own, it's number one, tough for a single wolf to make a good living, to bring down a large game. And it's also easy prey. So a mountain lion, for instance, could take it, or it could starve, or it may have encountered some other wolves. And unfamiliar wolves, young males especially, if they try to join other packs or other couples, pairs, can get the snot beat out of it. So Fish and Wildlife Service is doing the necropsy on that to find the full necropsy to get the cause of death, but they have stated it was apparently not human caused. Okay. Two animals have lost their collars, or their collars are inoperable. Had you heard that? You know, the very fancy collars, very expensive collars. And these wolves do terrible things to collars if they're running together. You know, I don't like the looks of that necklace you got on. And they chew on them and beat the ever living daylights out of the things. So it didn't, not surprising that some have failed. I suspect at some point the state will try to recollar them. The other, so they've got 9 of the original 10 are still living, and the 2 males in North Park at last report are still living. The other one that you may have heard about earlier in April, did you hear about one in Elbert County? Wolf located in Elbert County. Caught in a legally set trap for coyotes, and it was found dead in the trap. And the social media went wild. Parks and Wildlife was secretly bringing in these animals. So, but Fish and Wildlife Service retrieved the animal because they are endangered, and ran genetic analysis, and its genetic signature showed that it was related to the Upper Great Lakes wolves, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. Now, I personally have a hard time believing that it made it all the way on its 4 paws from Minnesota to Elbert County, Colorado. Further, the Fish and Wildlife Service folks said it was in remarkably good shape. So there are a lot of captive wolves around the country, and it may well have been an escapee or something of that nature. Question?
Are these, oh, sorry. Are these timber wolves or that were reintroduced, timber wolves or gray wolves?
Gray wolf is the approved name by the International Union of Zoological Nomenclature. So
I think what's here now.
so they're Canis lupus, and I'll get into their classification. It's Eremotus, which is the subspecies of wolf that has occurred throughout the Rocky Mountains. Now, some will argue that I might as well cover now. You see a lot of arguments about the old prairie wolf. It's subspecies epithet escaped me now, but the great white wolf, the buffalo wolf, and some folks saying we should not have reintroduced this Eremotus subspecies because the only one we should reintroduce is the extinct one, which had a hard time with that. So and when you really, I'll talk about it a little bit later. Another question? Yeah.
So I'm kind of missing why you have to be so specific about not showing specific locations. Like there's just these large areas.
Yeah, because there's
take a picture or something.
that would be more for safety reasons for the wolf. there's a lot of animus towards wolves. And, you know, and we really want to protect anybody that would ever think to try to track down a wolf and shoot it, because we'd like to save them $100,000 and a year or two in jail. So yeah, it's, yeah, but for human harassment of any kind, really, would be the reason. And that is those precise locations. And I dealt with that during the links introduction also. We have what's called the Colorado Open Records Act, which is kind of like the federal open records FOIA. We have exemptions in the Colorado Open Records Act for just this sort of thing, to protect those precise locations.
Just repeat the question.
I'm sorry?
Just repeat the question in general.
Oh, good. Yeah, the question was why mask the precise locations of these animals? And the other reason, well, no, it's primarily protect the animal and prevent harassment. Good, thanks, Rachel. Yes.
See them forming the pack and hunting in a pack and possibly reproducing as a pack then? Are they just kind of on their own?
So I'm sorry now.
Are they working as a pack? Do you see them forming as a pack and acting as a pack?
Okay, yeah, the question whether they're forming as a pack, acting as a pack. The state has not been forthcoming with that, whether we've got certain number of singles, you know, lone wolves, but so they've not stated it specifically. What I can say is, inferring from things they have said, that most of them are associated with at least one other wolf. Okay, and not single. You know, they, well, let's see. We know we got at least two that are hanging out together in Grand County. There is a den in Grand County, and it's near a ranch, and we'll get into that a bit. So two, and I would suspect, if that's the case, and it's not been released by the state, and but if they behave as other small populations, pioneer populations do, you would suspect that that would be a full adult, one of the full adult males would be part of this pair. The female obviously was now coming up on 2 years old. Would not surprise me if there were a third female. Sometimes they do that. The others, remember I mentioned that some of the collars had failed. And in the report of that, the state said they were not too worried about that because these animals were associated with other animals that did have operating collars. So I'm saying there's 4 plus 2. So you've got at least 6 there, and then the 2, of course, they're unfortunately males up in North Park, and they've been hanging together. So they've likely end in I would guess mid-April. They were starting to get some indications in April at the Wildlife Commission meeting, brought up the point that they were getting some intermittent GPS locations from the female, which would indicate she was going underground in the den for more than 4 hours at a time. So you got these blanks for this female, and then it shows again. So if that's the case, and let's say early to mid-April, gestation 62 days, and then within a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, the pups will emerge from the den. But they'll stay there and they got to get fed. And in Grand County, at a couple of ranches, there have been some depredation. There's also been depredation in Jackson County. This started early April, specific to one rancher. And have been so far between April 2nd and April 28th, been 4 incidents of depredation on cattle, more than 4 cows and cattle. But there's 4 incidents. And creates a lot of heartache. It's rough. But the Division of Wildlife and Department of Ag are trying their best to provide material and personnel to try to mitigate future losses. Good news in my way of thinking, and from what I can see and knowing how often wolves need to eat. I mean, they can fast. They're built to go long periods of time, 2 weeks plus, without eating. But the fact there has not been a report of a depredation on cattle since October 28th and now we're at the 9th. So it's kind of good news to me that maybe they have located venison instead of beef, we would hope. But we'll talk about it a bit about it later, but there are compensation funds, substantial compensation funds that are coming out of our taxes to provide ranchers with materials to try to lessen the chance their stock could be attacked by wolves and also for damage. But once a kill is documented as an actual wolf kill. So any other questions on the current status? Yes.
When you say mitigation, I know they use donkeys, they use tasers, they go out and watch them and try to keep their stock safe. What other ways are there to prevent the kills?
Yeah, to prevent predation or lessen the chance is more like one-on-one. I'll talk about some more later, but it is hiring range riders to patrol the areas that are most vulnerable. Rubber bullets, flashbang, noisemakers, floodlights, something called flaggery, which is like orange flagging on electric fence. Sometimes on electric fence, sometimes not. That kind of disrupts the wolves, makes them a little nervous. Although some of these, just like any animal, any of these techniques to lessen the chance of depredations on cattle or sheep, like other animals, like we've seen with deer and elk and everything else, they habituate to that. Put an owl replica up in your garden to chase away the birds. How long does that work? So, but if it's a short-term situation, it can do it. If the wolves are passing by your ranch and they see this, they'll keep going. Yes.
I believe I heard that there's also reimbursement for livestock taken by wildlife, mountain lions, for example, if the mountain lion were to take cattle, then there's a whole
Yeah.
that, not just wolf.
Yeah, the compensation,
Yeah.
once depredations are shown, and verified by a local district manager that's been trained in that, ranchers can be eligible up to $15,000 per animal. Now, show you the website in a little bit about where you can check to see what the latest status is. I can assure you, rarely, it's fair market value up to $15,000, also includes veterinary bills. And once the cattle are on the open range, there's some ability if I or I'm in a pool grazing situation with other ranchers, we've got one depredation that's documented by a wolf. And all of a sudden I got 5 calves that I can't find. They're gone. There's an opening for that to also be reimbursed. But when you go to the website for the Parks and Wildlife has just put out to take a look at the payments that have been made for depredation, they are in that fair market value. The only one that I've seen so far that hit 15 grand was for one of the dogs was killed over in Jackson County. So anyway, that's the gray wolf. And there are several subspecies of them, or have been in the past. Mexican gray wolf is Canis lupus bailey-i, and that's a whole different story down in New Mexico, Arizona. That gives you an idea. 115 pound wolf is a pretty large guy. Some will exceed it, but they're mostly going to be in that 80, 90 pounds. But you can take a look at that graph or that graphic, and you can see the difference in size between wolves and, let's say, coyotes. And a lot of folks since the release have been saying, oh, I saw the wolf here, saw one down in Allen's Park, whatever. You got to be pretty cautious. Visually, if it's just a lone animal and you don't have a way to evaluate its real size, I've seen some coyotes that look awfully large, and I get closer to them and they get a little smaller as I get closer. Big thing is, say, for the most part, they're going to be with another animal. Big thing about them is, I would suggest people, and this doesn't do it justice, but take a look at the ears relative to its head. Look at coyotes next time you see it. They got pretty big ears. Wolf ears, a little more rounded and a little closer to the skull. They don't show up as much. We talked about they can breed just shy of 2 years of age. Don't always, but by the time they're coming on their 4th year, 3 years old, and then likely to breed if they are with the dominant pair in the pack. So it's 6, 7 pups is pretty common. Usually 1 litter per pack, but very large packs, especially up in Yellowstone, soon after the initial reintroduction wolves of Yellowstone, they did, like a lot of newly introduced populations do, they overshoot and then they come down to lower equilibrium. And when they overshoot like that and get very large packs, 20, sometimes 20 plus, sometimes been a few instances in Yellowstone where 1 pack has produced up to 3 litter at one time. As we've talked about, they're obligate carnivores. They may eat some berries once in a while, chew on a little grass or something like your dog does, but they need meat to survive. And there's a list: elk, deer, moose, big orange sheep, beaver, cattle, and sheep. So, yep. And that's another thing about the source populations of wolves that were brought down from Oregon. They were packs that generally preyed on elk. That was kind of one of the stipulations in defining what a good source population would be. Is bring elk eaters. So the pack at full build out, after everything stabilizes, 10 is, other parts of the country, 10 is about an average pack size. Some places have them, much smaller. The federal designation of, a pack in like, recovery plans, they'll say 2 makes a pack. Professionally, my professional opinion, 2 makes a pair. Yeah, so it can be plus or minus, and generally one breeding pair. Commonly, 4 or 5 is not uncommon either, but neither is 15, 16. The range, that all depends on prey abundance, and prey accessibility. So they find a good place to get a lot of elk calves or something like that. They're not going to range that much, but up to 300 square miles, they can cover a pack as they're coursing, looking for prey. They can cover 30 miles a day, in a heartbeat. Other thoughts, but that's the social organization of these animals. They do work in packs. The one study that I've run across is that packs of 4 or more tend to be more successful in bringing down prey than fewer than that. We'll talk a little bit about why that might be. Why a pack? What's the advantage of them hunting together? What's the skull on the left? Mountain lion. How's it hunt? Solitary, stealth, stalks, springs. Either takes it thoracically or at the back of the neck, brings the animal down. What's the big difference between their skulls? Nice, short, rostrum, right? Whereas the wolf, long. That long nose is an adaptation because you can fit more olfactory sensors. They rely a lot on that. But think about physics. Who can exert more pressure? Here, at the joint, the mandibular joint of a mountain lion, he can exert huge pressure because he's just got that short amount of space between the fulcrum and the point of contact. Wolves, that's they can't bite that hard. I mean, I say that from a personal experience and wouldn't want to get bit by one, but yeah, that's why it kind of takes several wolves to bring down a full-grown elk. Okay, so they've got a nip and a bite. They can't exert the kind of pressure like a mountain lion can. So that makes sense. But the reason, the evolutionary advantage of it is, okay, I need a long nose so I can smell prey a long way away. So my trade-off is, even though I don't like my uncle, I'll hang out with him, right? So. So here's a typical life cycle. This is taken from Yellowstone. Our cycle in the year will be roughly the same. You start the mating season is going to be in February, early March, something like that. 62 days. You'll have pups. They're going to be in the den for several weeks before they emerge. And then they start wrestling with each other. The adults are bringing bones and meat for them and, tending to them. They grow rather rapidly, and you get about, July or so, the adults will typically move the young to what's called the rendezvous site, get away from the initial natal den, and that makes some sense. Because if the adults are having to feed these young week after week after week, what happens to the prey density within the range of the wolves? So pick them up, move them to some fresh territory, and terrorize the deer and elk in that area. And one thing I want to point out here is about the time these pups of the year, by the time they're about 8 to 9 months old, their structure, their skeletal structure is about as big as it's going to get. They're not fully grown because from then on, they're packing on muscle, meat and muscle. But as far as the basics of them, they're pretty well set there, and they can start joining the adults in the hunt. Any questions on basic ecology and makeup of them? Yes.
Well, I don't know if the question falls in that category, but have there been studies before they made the decision to release these wolves in Colorado? Have there been studies on the impact for these cattle or for the human populations in those areas, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Been in these studies on the effects the wolves will have, specific to Colorado, not really, because we haven't had them, so we've had to infer from work that's been done elsewhere, but a good bit of it, cover that in just a little bit. Most of the studies show that, the impact on the general cattle industry on the state, whether it's Montana or whatever, is almost immeasurable. Except for the rancher place it's happening, right? So, but we'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about our expectations. So how we got here, it sounds like you're pretty familiar with this, so I won't take too long, but it started in 2020, a group of pro-wolf activists got this question on the ballot. Should the state, or will the state, it orders the state to reintroduce wolves by the end of 2023. And they worded it pretty wisely. We talked about designated lands in Colorado west of the Continental Divide. And you're going to hold statewide hearing and use scientific data. And you're not going to restrict land usage. And you are going to compensate landowners and ranchers for the losses. So they covered a lot of the basics about how this should be done. And it met with a great deal of pushback. Folks are saying it shouldn't belong on the ballot. I said, this is ballot box biology, you can't do that. No, fact remains, it was on the ballot. And so we'll talk about the biology a little more. It was, yes, questions?
It's come about because you see in the environment how overeaten the willows and the habitat are.
Mhm. We'll chat about that and just when we get into the impact.
About by that.
Yeah, but that was one of the arguments for. was, the effects on the environment of having wolves or not having wolves. But the basic biology was this question: is there enough prey? Is there enough space to support a self-sustaining population of wolves? Right? You know, at the wide level, the landscape level. So the question is, can we have a self-sustaining population of wolves? So as a biologist, first question somebody asked me about whether we can have a population of species X. Well, if they could survive here, why ain't they here? And that's the question with wolves. Some folks rightly said, hey, if they could make it here, wouldn't they be here? So you think a little bit about why they aren't. They were wiped out, essentially wiped out in the early 1900s. Last one in Colorado was like 1942 or something like that. But before that, there was nowhere near a viable population. And so you hear the horrible stories, you know, the ranchers poisoned them, shot them. The federal government hired trappers to get rid of wolves. Wasn't that terrible? Because, you know, all they're trying to do is make a living. But they were eating cattle. Why were they eating cattle? 1910, how many elk did we have in Colorado? 500? Outside, maybe 1,000. What else are they gonna eat? You know, might have had 100,000 deer. There was nothing else for them to do but to come into that constant contact with people that were trying to make a living on the landscape. So they went away. That was a pretty easy answer to get. So now we say, what's changed? And is there enough prey? You know how many elk we got in Colorado? More than any other state, right? Statewide population, 303,000 was as of the 2023, what they call the post-hunt population. So the state inventories does their stratified random sampling to get estimates of the population after the hunting season. So we'll just focus on elk for a bit. 303,000 elk. Add to that the 30,000 that were taken before the hunting or during the hunting season. So there, but before elk calving, right? So at the low end of the population of elk in this state is 340,000 elk. Now, do the math, figure out how much each elk weighs. There's a lot of red meat on that landscape. And now going back to Proposition 114, talk about west of the Continental Divide. This is statewide. West of the Continental Divide, around Grant County and beyond, that runs about 2/3 to 3/4 of this statewide population. And the same for the numbers that the hunters take. Well, that seems like a lot. 10% of the population getting removed by hunters every year. A little concept that that wildlife game biologists use and has been shown to be the case over many, many, many years to justify seasons and numbers of elk permits given, is not all of the mortality by hunters is just added to whatever natural mortality is. Much of it is what's called compensatory, right? These are the animals that would have died otherwise. So for anybody who thinks taking 30,000, oh my gosh, you're beating the population to death. Yeah, think about it a little bit.
How many new calves are there?
How many what?
Each year, how many calves?
How many calves?
Yeah, how many calves are born each year?
Yeah, elk. How many calves elk have? Typically one per cow, and she'll start when she's 2.5, or she's start doing the mating generally in her second year, halfway through her yeah, not as a calf. So she's born that first year, she's not mated. The second year, she'll have a calf when she's 2. We did a study when I was with the state, and one of my researchers did work in Gunnison on survival rates of cows. And his came to me after a couple of years, said, shaking his head, we radio collared cows, monitored their mortality. I said, Gary, if you want immortality, become a cow now. We had 100 cows collared for years, and they wouldn't die. We couldn't get the data point. When we did the elk culling here at Rocky Mountain National Park, we had a 20-year-old cow that was pregnant. So think about that. Think about compound interest with an elk population. Okay, let's give them a year, say they don't start having their first calf until they're 3. And they have one a year for 17 years, and half of those are female. Think about what the potential population growth is. Are we getting, am I run too long? Sorry about that. Anyway, so if there's enough prey, you're gonna, I won't go into all the math, but to support and being very liberal with the estimates, 3,000 pounds of meat a year per wolf. And once again, wolf predation, is it compensatory? Is it additive? Is it a mixture of both? Enough space? Yeah. We're 36% federal, belongs to all of us. West of the Continental Divide, 38,000 square miles, 27,000 of it's public, and 250 wolves take up maybe 10% of the public land on occasion. So the biology question, is there enough prey and space to support a self-sustaining population? Yeah, we can. We've got enough of those resources to support a self-stop population. So I would contend this was not ballot box biology, because the biology is fixed. The role of scientists, the role of biologists is to say what can be done. What this ballot initiative said was, society, you own the wildlife. Now, tell us, should we do it, given all those factors we're talking about? And they bought in 2020, it squeaked through, and lo and behold, 51% to 49% it passed. And most of the support, of course, came from the Front Range and a lot of the opposition, but there's lower populations on the west side, west slope, were vehemently opposed to it. But it became law, became statute, and for the next almost 3 years, the 2.5 years, efforts were put together to put a restoration and management plan together, and by the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the Wildlife Commission, resulting in May of 2023 adoption of the final plan. And this was, say, thousands upon thousands of public comments, 2 groups of experts, well, one group of technical experts from around the country that were familiar with wolves and reintroductions, called the Technical Advisory Group, that address things like where should wolves come from, say, elk eating populations, should it be a hard or a soft release, hard release. So those folks provided the technical expertise, and then there was this cross section of interest called the Stakeholders Advisory Group, and there were wolf advocates, wolf opponents. We had county commissioners. I think one from Grand County was on the SAG group, and they talked, and it was wonderful to see what they were doing. I mean, they were listening to each other and they're concerned. But it developed into this restoration management plan that is putting wolves on the ground now. And some of the things covered were the expectations we talked about. Wolves are going to eat something besides elk. So ranching is going to have to be different. There's going to be game damage. Need to be changes in practices. Ranchers are in one fashion or another going to have some increased costs. I like the lower right photo because one of the big, prior to wolves, one of the big game damage issues you have are elk getting into the haystacks. And I guess when I'm a rancher, I'd like to see a pack of wolves run those. Actually, as a hunter on public land, and I would see herds of elk on private land. I say, man, I'd like to see something coming. Run those elk past me up on public land. So I mentioned this earlier. Studies that are done on a statewide basis on the impact of predation, depredation on cattle is pretty minuscule. Again, if you are a, let's see if I can squeeze it here. If you're a rancher in Jackson County, Grand County, Moffett and Routt County, it's not an impact on 2.6 million cattle that we have in this state. You take those 3 or 4 counties, you're talking about 60,000 cattle. Okay, so all of a sudden it's a larger impact. And if you happen to be the rancher who's using land where there's a wolf den and he's feeding his pups off that, and you have 500 cattle and he's taking 10, we're talking some change there. So it's something to pay attention to. I say that plan did say you confirm it's a wolf depredation, you can get fair market value up to 15,000, and you also get veterinary bills. And if you're on open range where you've got missing cattle at the same time that there's been depredations, you can also claim that. But say it's kind of but that again, to have to go out, find the cattle, to contact CPW, get the bills together. There's some additional operating costs. Here are some of the couple of that on the lower right is the flattery that I mentioned, the flagging. I say that'll probably protect the cattle within an area, especially if you're maybe feeding or having clustered up for calving. If the wolves are passing by, keep them away. Range riders, the Colorado Department of Ag and Colorado Parks and Wildlife just a week or two ago did allocate $20,000 to Grand County to hire range riders, especially around the ranch that has been getting hit the hardest with the depredations. But cracker shells, they make the big bang. Been discussion whether ranchers can use night scopes when they're checking their cattle, that without getting a foul of somebody thinking they're hunting with in unfair ways, and they're not. They're checking their cattle. Expectations on the prey. Talk about behavioral changes in prey. They're going to be more nervous, less sedentary. We've seen the effects of sedentary elk over the years, and if they're moving them around, which they will do, you could get lower productivity on the elk. And that's another issue also comes about with cattle. If they're getting harassed by predators, they may well show lower birth rates or lower fecundity rates. And there are, in the management plan, there are some stipulations for that also. The ecological changes, much has been made of the apex predator, that you start moving the elk around and all of a sudden these degraded willow riparian areas are gonna spring back. And it was a wonderful idea that Dr. Ripple came up with and was part of the lexicon for a number of years. More recently, Tom Hobbs and David Cooper, professor, doctors at Colorado State University, did some experimental work over 20 years. Said, and not so fast. It's going to take a little longer. It's not a magic bullet. Recreation changes. Someone mentioned this earlier. Really worry more about if you hear thunder, get to lower ground. As far as wolves attacking humans, just hardly measurable. There have been 2 fatal attacks in North America. One was a miner up in northern Canada at a mine that was walking around a dump where there were habituated wolves that were coming into the trash dump. The other was sad. It was a single runner, hiker or runner in Alaska that did get attacked by a wolf. But most of the wolf attacks that have been documented in the 1900s have been one every 10, 15 years. Those were rabid. One was prior to 2002 was killed. The attendant went into the cage with wolves. Don't do that. Don't hike inside a wolf cage. Okay. Cover real quickly legal stuff. Wolves are not protected under the Endangered Species Act in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and parts of eastern Oregon and Washington. They're threatened in Minnesota and the rest of the states. They are classified as endangered. There are about 6,000 wolves throughout the lower 48 states. Okay, and all these areas. You may have heard Congressional Representative Bober introduced legislation, I think last week, to delist wolves throughout the lower 48, and it passed the House of Representatives. But latest I saw, it's going nowhere. In Colorado, it's slightly different on the endangered species. For reintroduced wolves, they're classified as a experimental non-essential population. That gives us much more flexibility in how we handle things. So, for instance, if a rancher sees a wolf in the act of attacking its cow, he's legally permitted to shoot it. The types of hazing that are being allowed now with the cracker shells, that sort of thing, is allowed under the experimental population concept. And that was a stipulation for the reintroduction of wolves. In the state, just wanted to cover a couple things. Long-standing statute, Colorado Parks and Wildlife is statutorily obligated to manage, protect wildlife and their environment throughout, regardless of what species. In the mid 1970s, the big deal was the creation of a threatened and endangered, non-game threatened and endangered species act. And that was wonderful. It specifically said non-game species, which wolves are the responsibility of the state. And the one I loved was it said it was gonna be funded from the general fund, because Colorado Division of Wildlife used to get all of its funding just from license sales, right, or related to that. And this gonna use general fund tax monies to do that. And they did for like 2 years. That's when I came on board. And then change of administration. And the amount we got from the general fund was $1 a year. Big time. So one of the unintended consequences of the wolf reintroduction, Senator Perry Will, who used to be a Division Wildlife employee, in fact, started saying, we're not gonna use hunting and fishing license dollars to reintroduce wolves, we're gonna use general fund tax dollars. You, the owners of wildlife, the public, voted to bring them in. You get to share that responsibility. And so they're up now to, through 2005, the latest bill that just passed, be $7+ million that are of tax funds that will go into that reintroduction. Two quick things, I got about 2 minutes to go, if I can have it, is one thing this whole process pointed out to me is we have what's called the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's what sets North America apart from Europe, from the old feudal system and the king's game, that sort of thing. It's called the North American model of wildlife conservation, pulled together from years of research and case studies by some of the top names in wildlife management. And it had 7 pillars, things like you don't sell wildlife for profit. You only kill wildlife for legitimate purposes. But 2 of the pillars were great. And it's really the Colorado validation of the model, or the corollary to it. And the first pillar is the wildlife is held in trust for all citizens. It means it belongs to all of us. Just because I buy a hunting license doesn't give me any greater ownership of that wildlife than it does somebody that doesn't hunt. You know, I buy a license because all of you who own the wildlife are giving me the privilege to go hunting if I pay this money. Okay, and that's essentially what the passage of Proposition 114 did. It was saying the public Coloradoans own the wildlife is all of ours, and we're saying what you should do with it. And the 6th one is that management will take place by science. And I think, if anything, the amount of science that has gone into this initial stages of the restoration was guided by science. Not the question about whether we should or not, but whether we can or not. And so that, I'd say I've been trying to talk to one of my former colleagues that's kind of the coordinator for the wolf program. You tell Eric, you've got a PhD staring you in the face, go get it. No. I'll just see the project through. Slap him upside the head. Anyway, so I want to bring that point up and say, and the wildlife held in trust for all citizens. It's not just that we all own it, but we all have that responsibility. So finally, wildlife management is using some of the general funds, which, because it's all of our responsibilities, not just hunters. And can't leave without saying what this really relates to in general. This whole effort was written about, published in 1947, written a number of years before. One of our heroes, Aldo Leopold, if you have never read a Sand County Almanac, it's just wonderful literature. But one of his statements, to keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. And that's what wolves can be, what they are in the Rocky Mountain ecosystem. They are one of the cogs of the wheels, but we gotta be smart enough to do it, to find ways to coexist with them, have it done fairly, and with good science, not rumors and propaganda. So that's, well, one other thing. Next up. You heard about this? That was passed in the legislature, that the state is being directed to restore Wolverine to Colorado. Now, they aren't just little wolves, okay? I just got to point that out. Some people think they are. These are scavengers. They don't prey on much, might take some sheep, but for the most part, they eat stuff that's already dead, sometimes long dead. And wouldn't be very many, but that came through legislation. Perry Will, in fact, person that I mentioned that said, we're not going to use any license fees to introduce wolves. He's the one that introduced the bill to reintroduce Wolverine into Colorado. So the state's starting to look at that. So glad you came out. Hopefully you had a little bit of information.
That was really interesting, Gary. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome.
Little net.
And then, so you can keep tracking on what's going on, a couple different ways. Going to the Parks and Wildlife's website. One of the interesting things you can do is go to the website, and across the bar on the top, it says About Us. Click on that, and it says Commission. And you click on that, and it has a listing of each monthly meeting. And they live stream it, and they also post the agenda, so you can look, see what issues are there, and almost every month they have a wolf update. Click on it at the appropriate time, and you can get the latest that they're willing to share with us. And and there's other things.
Is there another introduction coming of wolves?
Yeah, there'll be another reintroduction. That's up to 15 wolves. I should have mentioned that. Up to 15 wolves from the Colville Federation of Tribes in Eastern Washington. They've agreed to provide up to 15 wolves starting in December of this year, running into March of 2025. So that'll be the next iteration.
Same general area?
For the release.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. And you get into, if you look up that wolf management plan, it identifies two fairly large areas. One is actually north of Gunnison. The other extends from basically west of Vale Pass and north, and hooks back obviously to Grand County, all the way to Glenwood Springs and up north of I-70. So, but a lot's going to depend on what the current ones do, and whether, and there's going to be a question: do you dump other wolves on top of them, or you want them to colonize other areas? So I won't predict that one.
That was fascinating.